Hey guys, I'm on my lunch break right now from school and I wanted to make an audio today. And I don't know, I want to make an audio about kind of some of the things that I hear and that I observe throughout my day and just kind of my opinion on it. Like, for example, there's this girl in my class and she is completely disrespectful. She's one of those people that have no filter. She brought up in class about how she wanted to be a social worker, and that's what I want to do as well. I want to do art therapy, but in order to do art therapy is just a stream of therapy, and therapy goes through social work. And so I want to be a social worker, and I know what it takes to be a social worker, and I feel so bad for some people because I'm like, I don't know, like, when these people get this like reality check, it's going to be very hard for them. To be a social worker, to be a human being that cares for another person, social work is an act of service. It's literally being a public servant. And so it's not just about getting paid and everything like that. Like, you're genuinely, like, people are pouring their heart out to you. People are telling you things that they haven't told anyone before. They're trusting a complete stranger with the knowledge that they perceive that you have to handle their issues. And so it takes a whole lot of humility to be a social worker. It takes a lot of humbling yourself, knowing that you might not know everything. You might not have the answers to every situation. And then it also takes being able to be resilient. And when I compared the characteristics that it took to be a social worker and how Christ tells us to walk in this life, they're very similar. You know, it took a lot of humility and just humbleness for Christ to say, you know, if you say that I do this, if you say that I'm saying that I'm someone I'm not, then that's what you say, then let it be so. Like, it took a lot of humility for Christ not to just come up and start doing a bunch of things and showing off what he could do. Like, it takes a lot of humility to walk this life, especially when you're here to save people, help people, serve people. And it takes a lot of denying yourself. And so pride will be the biggest thing that will stand in your way in this life. It will be the biggest thing because you think you're always right. You think your way is the only way. You think the knowledge you have is the only knowledge that's acceptable. And you can't accept correction, and that is one of like the worst things ever. Like, when you cannot accept correction, it is going to be very hard for you to navigate this world. You have to be ready for your own clients to correct you. And also, being a social worker takes emotional resilience and being able to regulate your emotions. It's not every single time, you know, you feel like you were done wrong or you feel like an offense has happened, you act on it, you speak on it. Being a social worker is knowing, being a servant of Christ is knowing when to speak and when to be quiet, when to act and when to let God act for you. There are certain things that God will say, okay, you know what, you can handle that on your own. You're mature enough in your faith now to handle this on your own. And there's certain things where God will say, I don't think you're mature enough in this area, let me handle it for you. And we need to be able to discern what God is saying. And so I feel like, I personally think that the best way to go into streams like therapy and, you know, working in a rehabilitation center, working in a correctional facility, like working in these places where people's lives have the opportunity to be transformed, even being a teacher in a high school, I feel like the best background, the best experience you can have is being a child of God, because everything that they require of you in those fields, God has already put within us. We're just unlocking stages. We're just moving up and trying to find those things in us and find what way us ourselves and our individuality can explore those things, right? So maybe your humbleness looks like letting somebody be wrong and not having to always correct them. And maybe my humbleness means, you know, humbling myself to a lower position than I've actually been assigned. Like, my degree might say bachelor's in social work, but I might lower myself to a first year studying pre-social work, just in order to be humble and to come and present yourself as that servant, because that's what we are. We're nothing more than servants. We are not masters. We have one master. There's only one master. And so I just brought up that example of that girl because she's going to have such a horrible reality check when she realizes that you can't talk to people any type of way. You can't treat people any type of way and then expect to be respected. The reason why public servants like police officers, firefighters, you know, the reason why these people are respected so much is because they literally put themselves down to the lowest of the lowest to help bring people up. And that takes a lot of resilience. That takes a lot of being able to stop and be like, okay, I need to deny myself. I need to put myself in this person's shoes. I need to ask God for discernment. I need to ask God for the right wisdom, because a study actually showed that if a therapist or a social worker is talking to you about your childhood or whatever and suggests that something might have happened, because of how knowledgeable we see them, and because of how much of a prominence they have in our lives as being people who know more than we do on that intellectual level, we begin to make up stories in our minds that fit that narrative. So, for example, a therapist suggested to a woman that she might have been abused when she was a child, and then she started making up these scenarios in her head that she was actually abused. And obviously, like, if we're thinking about things from 5 years ago, like, you can't remember the exact order things happened in unless you have that gift, but a lot of people don't. And so she started making up all these things in her head just because it was suggested to her by a social worker. And her dad was a pastor, and he lost his job, he lost his reputation because she said he abused him, but it never actually happened. And that's how destructive the mind could be. The mind can be very powerful, but if we don't know how to use it properly, the devil will use it against us. And so I'm just using that example because the social worker didn't do anything wrong, but she suggested something to somebody who wasn't able to have an emotional grasp on life. And so that social worker didn't understand who she was working with completely, and that girl ended up doing something really destructive. And so it's funny how we are one part of somebody's life, but we can play such a huge part just by something as simple as a suggestion. So that also reminds us to be careful of what we say. Again, knowing when to speak and knowing when to be like, listen, I'm not mature enough on this topic, on this subject. I can't give you the advice that I would like to give you, but I think you should seek higher help. Right? I think you should pray about it. We don't say that enough anymore. We don't say, I think you should pray about it. And so I just wanted to make this audio because I think that's so interesting, how a lot of people want to do good. We have that intention is there, but we're not looking in the inner self first. We need to fix who we are inside, and everything else will fall into place.